So I just got back from a really cool trip doing something that I've never really done before. So me and Brad Hawthorne and our buddy Rob, who happens to be a really good photographer, actually took a road trip about 12 hours east of here to the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, to chase down big walleyes, pulling crankbaits. So we were doing that traditional, you know, planer boards, a bunch of planer boards on either side of the boat, pulling big crankbaits for big fish. And it was really a cool experience because I've never really done that like full-fledged Great Lakes trolling deal. And this was really a great, perfect opportunity to do a little bit of experimenting with Northland's new rumble stick. In particular, this number 5 size was perfect for what we were doing. We caught a bunch of fish on this pink color here, but in particular, probably the most productive one by far was this sneeze color. And I'll get this nice and close to the camera here so you can see it. It's basically chartreuse with green and black dots, and then that orange belly, of course, too. And you'll notice that I'm not showing off this color in the rumble stick because I think my sneeze colored rumble sticks ended up in Brad's box somehow. Not sure how that happened, but needless to say, this was a really cool trip. And the first thing that Brad Hawthorne is gonna talk about is when he likes to bust out the cranks.
So how to find, you know, decide what are you gonna do? Are you gonna pull cranks? Are you gonna do puppet minnows? What are you gonna pull spinners? Basically it's time of the year, right? Early season and late. We're doing that, you know, under 60-degree water temp. We're usually doing crankbaits just because that's the fastest way to extract fish, right? Bug hatches, things like that. Mid, summer, that's when you start moving into like your spinner rigs, things like that, you know, bottom bouncers, even spinners on planer boards. You kind of I always let my first bug hatch of the year kind of dictate, hey, are we gonna start pulling spinners? You know, are we moving from cranks to spinners or vice versa? But typically warmer water means you move into that spinner period for some, and then when you get into the dog days of summer, you move back down to smaller cranks. At least we do on Mille Lacs. You know, we start using, you know, stuff about like that, kind of crayfish action, buggy action stuff. And you kind of start the process. You go to one spectrum, kind of pause out on spinners, and then go back into crankbaits. And then by the end of the fall, we're using big stick baits again. So that's kind of how I decided to do it. The other thing is, if you go over a pot of fish and they're not eating cranks, slow down. It's not that hard to change over to spinners. Slow down, throw some spinners out, and see if that's what they want. You know, once you get into that 68, 70-degree mark, you're kind of going like this on, are you doing spinners? Are you doing cranks? You kind of got to experiment with it.
All right, so now that you know when to use crankbaits and pull them behind the boat, the next step is to analyze your electronics, see where you're marking fish, and use that to help you know where you want to set your baits. And that is the next tip that Brad is going to be talking about.
All right, so trolling fish here, you can see on the screen, I've got a bunch of fish that are right below that 20-foot mark, and then I got one high up here at 15, 16. All these fish, in my opinion, all these fish here are biters. Then you can see below this high mark here, I've actually got 2 or 3 sheltered marks right below that. So this would be the active of the most active. Not to say these aren't active, you can still get these fish to go. It's these fish that are stuck to the bottom that you're probably not gonna wanna pay attention to. So then when I set my spread, I go, okay, with the lures we're using right now, 80 feet gets you down about 15, 16. I'm gonna put a 3 or 4 there, and then I'm gonna drop the rest down. Some at 20 feet, some at 22 feet, and that's how I put it together based on what I'm seeing on my graph. Because here's the top end of the spectrum is 15, 16. The bottom end of my spectrum here is about 26, 25 feet, somewhere in there. So you just wanna make sure wherever you're seeing fish from top to bottom, I pay more attention to the fish. I'll set more lines towards the top end of the spectrum than versus the bottom. Like I only have 2 lines down here fishing this 22, 24 foot stuff. So that's how I set my lines when my graph looks exactly like this. And on most lakes, Lake of the Woods, Mille Lacs, it's kind of typical of what you'll see. The fish kind of set up all within, you know, 6 to 12 feet of each other.
Now the thing about pulling crankbaits is that you need to constantly be experimenting. You know, some days, like a couple of the days we were out there, the sneeze color was really good, but you need to be constantly experimenting with different colors, and you have to have a lot of baits out there so that you have a lot of data points to draw off of. You know, some days it's gonna be all about speed, other days it's gonna be about color, other days it's gonna be about profile, And then the depth in the water column is another variable to keep in mind. So you need to constantly be experimenting if you want to catch fish when you're doing this.
So I was just adjusting speed a hair. We had made a turn a while ago and I bumped it up to like 1.8, 1.9 to see how fast, see what the ceiling was on speed. So it'll come over the top of the lead. Yep, I'm just gonna drop the lead back straight. And then we went right back down to 1.2, 1.4. Oh, nice fish, Rob.
That's amazing.
Another one for the box.
I think we need to put that mucus color, another one of those mucus. That one's so green, dude.
Yeah.
Wow. That is just, that's awesome. We need another one of those mucus colors out. That's 3 fish on that guy now.
So that's sort of the fun deal with this bite. It's just, it's kind of one of those things you dial it in. I think Brad will talk about that here. Coming up next, just sort of how you dial in the bite. But one thing we are noticing right now is the rumble sticks are heating up. We have kind of a variety of baits out right now, and we've kind of just been playing with colors, profiles, depths. Brad's actually been messing with the speed of the boat as well. But anyway, I'll let Brad cover that right now.
All right, so if you're coming out to Erie, you know, usually there's a lot of guys that go out here, so I'd recommend like getting in with the crew guys that know what's going on out here. We come every year, and you know, whether it's 2 boats or 10 boats or however we do it, but when we get out here, the main thing we do is start experimenting with color, split up, divide and conquer, and then once we find the fish, then we go through where are they at on the screen. You know, if you go to your Humminbird and start looking at where the fish actually are in the water column, and you'll see here we've got fish real tight to the bottom, 28, 29 feet, and then we're also seeing fish right along in the 20-foot area too. So what we'll do is look at your graph first and identify where the fish are in the water column, and then use enough line on the lures to get those lures 1 to 3 feet above the fish. And then just keep your eye on your graph and adjust your lures accordingly. And the number one thing is dial in color. You know, tomorrow it could be, you know, a natural perch, but that's kind of dialing in the bait. The next is speed. If you're constantly going over fish and you're not getting bit, start changing up that color and then knock down the speed. Speed is the easiest thing you can change when you're using a large planer board setup, where you can just go hit the button and drop it down. Like right now, I'm just using my trolling motor. That's all I'm using to propel this big 20-foot boat, and by one click, I'm dropping down 1/10 of a mile an hour. So like right now, we haven't got bit in a while. I'm gonna go down to 1.4 to 1.2 and see if that triggers the fish, because we literally been catching fish all day. Sometimes it's at 1.8, sometimes it's at 1.4 to 1.2. So that's kind of it. Don't get complacent with when the bite slows down, that of moving. If the fish are still here, play with color, play with speed, and you know, don't really mess around with your board setups on making S-turns and stuff like that. You'll just end up with a mess.
Now let's take a look at the absolute biggest mistake that Brad sees guys making when they're trying to do this deal.
And one of the bigger mistakes people make is going too fast. Like, I consider speed trolling anything over like 2.2, 2.5, but you'll see a lot of guys where they first start trolling, they go at whatever speed that their motor is in gear at, okay? And that might be 2.5 miles an hour, it might be close to 3. Most of the time, generally speaking, that's way too fast, right? So that's why you kind of want to have bags with you. You want to have, that's another chunky one, jeez. But speed is critical. Like today, we're within 0.2 of a mile an hour on what we're doing for speed. 2.2 to 2.6 is like the jam as far as catching fish today. So if you are out here and you didn't have a bag or something to slow you down, and you were locked into going 2.2, 2.4, 2.5, you're not gonna catch any fish. You may get lucky and get a few, but speed is absolutely critical when it comes to trolling walleyes.
So if you haven't noticed already, there's one big reoccurring theme in this video. If you're gonna be pulling crankbaits for walleyes, you need to be experimenting to find out what the fish prefer on that particular day. And honestly, Basically, that's true no matter what presentation you're doing. You know, if you're jig fishing, you're gonna wanna experiment with the size of your jig, the color of your jig, how far you're casting it out away from your boat, maybe the type of line that you're using. There's a lot of different variables at play no matter what you're doing, but what's cool about this particular bite is the fact that you have the opportunity to experiment with so many different things. When we were out here on Lake Erie for a handful of days, we had the ability to use 3 lines per person. So we didn't even have a boat packed with guys. We had 3 people in the boat and we could use 9 lines. So that's a lot of data that we were able to collect so that we could dial in the bite even faster. So we could have a bunch of different lures out and we could find out in a hurry what the fish were preferring. But regardless, it was an awesome trip. I had a ton of fun. I can't wait to get back out there. And spoiler alert, I might be going back out there in about 2 weeks. But it's a really cool bite and I can't wait to get back out there again. So if you were able to learn anything from this video, make sure to hit that little red subscribe button down below and stay tuned because we have more awesome videos to come. Thank you for watching.